Hello and welcome to The Cutting Room. A little mad sometimes and a movie show from all the right movies. I'm John, and clucking their thick tongues next to me are Matt.
Hello.
And Westy.
I'll suggest it also very delicately. Hello.
Today we're back in legendary classic territory. An iconic director's most iconic film. We're talking Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Mm-hmm. We should probably go black and white for this one, do you think, for a bit?
Why not?
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Reverse of Death Proof.
This was your choice, this one, Matt, so why are we talking about it?
Because when we did Jaws, we mentioned Hitchcock a few times on that. And it really reminded me that when we were doing the podcast, we only ever covered one Hitchcock film, which is quite bad, I think, for us. I mean, we did as many Todd Phillips films as we did Hitchcock, which is shameful. Shameful.
Furious, man.
I am, still. But where do you go next after Psycho, Vertigo, North by Northwest, The Birds? But I do think Psycho makes complete sense because it's a film I always seem to know about before I actually saw it because it gets referenced so often. So it's a punchline in an episode of Only Fools and Horses.
Have you any idea what a psycho, as you so eloquently put it, is?
Of course I have. He's the geezer what dresses up in his mother's clothes.
So by the time I saw it, I knew everything about it, but doesn't matter for this film because it's such a ride, and I just think it's Hitchcock at his finest.
Nice.
Yeah, I find it a fascinating film, to be honest. One of the biggest and most iconic movies to come out of Hollywood. Still highly thought of now. It's an incredible feat of filmmaking to me, which we'll talk about. Pre-blockbuster era, 1960, but Psycho was still a massive hit at the time, a cultural phenomenon, and always good to talk about somebody with the stature of Hitchcock and an older classic as well. So we've got lots to talk about with Psycho. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And Westy, Psycho for you?
Psycho for me. I mean, I'm getting a little bit confused. You mentioned Hitchcock so often because I've got Gus Van Sant written down here. Incredible job on that film.
Thankfully not.
Yeah, it's one word for it.
I know, amazing. No, Psycho. I mean, it's there, isn't it? In the blueprint of cinema, it is what it is. It's so influential, and Hitchcock's first horror film. It's so accomplished. It just makes it look easy. So yeah, one of my very favourites. Love it. Very excited to talk about it.
Great. Here we go then. We're off to Fairvale, California to talk Psycho. After Phoenix secretary Marion Crane steals $40,000 from her employer and goes on the run, she stops for the night at the ramshackle Bates Motel and meets its proprietor Norman, then his mother, resulting in murder. Mummy's boy, isn't he? Norman.
Wet lettuce.
Yeah. She's his best friend, though.
Directed by Alfred Hitchcock from a screenplay by Joseph Stefano, Psycho was produced by Paramount Pictures and stars Janet Leigh as Marion Crane and Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. So what we do on The Cutting Room is look at movies by breaking them down into their main creative parts. So with Psycho, we'll be talking about the director, the writing, the cast, and our own highlights from the movie, and we'll then each give the film a rating out of 10. So let's get into it. Up first, the director of Psycho, the master of suspense.
Gus Van Sant.
Unfortunately not. It's Alfred Hitchcock. 61 years old at the time Psycho was released, Hitchcock had been directing features since The Pleasure Garden 35 years earlier. Very experienced then, Matt. So how's his work on Psycho?
I think it's incredible because the film he made before this is North by Northwest.
I have just made a motion picture, North by Northwest.
And that is Hitchcock at his most colourful, at his most stylish. And then this, black and white, small scale, but that's all in its favour. I can't imagine this working in colour. What stands out for me, though, is how brilliantly he manipulates us as the audience, because all cinema is manipulation, makes us follow a narrative in a particular way, and Hitchcock was the master at that. Because we start off with this character, and you have to remember this is 1960s morality we're talking about here. She's unmarried, she's having an affair. When we see for the first time, it's clear that they've been having some afternoon delight. And then, pretty quickly, she rips off a boss, so she's a thief as well. And all these things mark her as a villain by normal 1960s standards.
Yeah.
But we view the first half of the film entirely from her perspective. When she's on the run, every scene on the road, it's an entirely straight line she's travelling on. It's like she's destined to end up at the Bates Motel, and we're trapped with her. It's the same when the cop pulls her over. When he's looking directly in the camera, which is directly into Marion's eyes and our eyes, we are her at that point. And that always reminds me of Silence of the Lambs. Those shots of Lecter and Crawford looking directly into Clarice's gaze, which is us in that film. But then when she gets killed, we don't emphasise with the sister, it's not the private detective, it's the guy who's covered it up. We are now complicit with Norman, who he's already been established as a peeping Tom.
He's a peeping Tom.
But we want him to get away with it. We should want him caught because we like Marion, but we want him to escape at the end. It's brilliantly done by Hitchcock because you don't even feel like you're being manipulated. You just think, but yeah, this is normal. This is the character I should empathise with. And it's not, and I think it's masterful stuff. So I love how he manipulates us to the audience. But I do also just want to mention, you've got to talk about his cameo as well.
Of course.
In this one happens pretty early. It's 6 minutes in, where from inside Marion's office, you can see him at the sidewalk wearing a nice Stetson outside.
Very nice.
Yeah, Joseph Stefano said the reason Hitchcock appears so soon in the film was to not ruin the pace once the film gets going.
Once you got to that murder scene, any interruption by seeing Hitchcock on screen would have been disastrous.
To be fair, if when Norman appeared through his peephole, it had been Hitchcock on the other side, the film might have been a lot shorter.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Hitchcock.
You've just gone back to bed.
Tiny towel, big fat belly. You'd be amazing.
I'm glad you said tiny towel.
Well, I mean, he's a big man.
But yeah, I mean, the level of artistry and visual storytelling on display, and what's a pretty dark and dirty story, is astonishing.
Yeah.
Hitchcock's most cinematic film for me. We're going to be talking about some of the more iconic moments a bit later on, but what's worth mentioning as well, away from the visuals, is Hitchcock's collaboration with his composer, Bernard Herrmann. They worked together on 7 other movies, all classics, but Psycho is Bernard Herrmann's most iconic music.
Oh, absolutely.
Surely.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's top
yeah,
5 for
easily.
soundtrack.
Oh, fantastic. I know that when he finished the film, Hitchcock actually thought Psycho was a failure. And he was thinking about releasing it as an episode of his TV show until he saw the cut with Herrmann's music, and he loved it.
Yeah.
The score is entirely string-based, which is a great idea. The main theme, obviously, is brilliant. I love Norman's 3-note motif, which plays throughout as well.
Yeah.
But the music is especially extraordinary in the shower scene.
Yeah.
That famous piercing screech representing the knife slashing. It has a name, that piece of music, actually. Do you know what it is?
Psycho Suite?
No, I don't have
It's called The Murder.
Of course it
Pretty
is.
obvious, really.
Well, fair enough. Should have guessed
Death
that.
of Qui-Gon.
So yeah, Hitchcock and Herrmann, one of the great director-composer collaborations, and Psycho is one of their best, and certainly the most famous, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You know what Hitchcock said? The success of Psycho was 30% down to the music.
Yeah, he's probably right.
30%?
Probably
Oh,
right,
wait,
yes.
man, it's about 90%. It's all the way through. 30%. Yeah. It's the reason he released it.
Yeah, I'll give you 30.
Yeah, I'll give you 30. What a bastard.
Well, Wesley, does the 61-year-old Hitchcock seem past it here to you?
Not at all. Not at all. This seems like it's directed by a 17-year-old kid who's just really excited about making a film that just absolutely blasts through from start to finish. It's just so vibrant. It's so accessible. It's just brilliant to watch because he just knows narrative so well. He knows structure so well. He knows how to work with actors so well by this point. He's just manipulating everybody. He's just so clever. He's just on the top of his game. And I think this is just a perfect example of that and how easy he just pulls you one place and takes you somewhere else and you can't quite see what's coming. And he knows it and he's just having a great time making this film, I think. From the shot choices to the camera moves to every single bit that he puts into this is fantastic. And I think John L. Russell, as the DP on this, deserves a shout as well. The choice to just shoot this on one lens that shows the 50mm, which is what he shot Rope on, to give it that kind of unity towards the scenes. Nothing, you don't see a massive... If you see a wide shot of the house, it means the camera has to go back and get a wide shot. Like, there's no distortions, there's no, like, edges of frames where it's shot on a 24mm for a close-up or whatever else. Everything is on the same lens, so you just feel like you're watching almost like a theatre performance or a theatre production. And I think that's incredibly ballsy to do. It's unheard of now that you kind of, just one lens, that's it. That's all you need, one lens, one camera, and get it done. It's just absolutely fantastic, and I love that. And I love, as well, because Hitchcock chose to shoot this in black and white, he didn't have to, but he wanted that real B-movie kind of feel to it. But he also brings something to that colour palette. I mean, when you first see her, Marion, she's in white, she's quite angelic, even though she's having the affair at the time, but she's dressing in white. And then when that decision's made, she turns totally to black. And even the purse goes from white to black. And things like that are just so subliminal. And you just kind of go, genius.
Yeah, I know that Paramount actually didn't like the script of Psycho, and because of that, they only gave Hitchcock a really small budget, $800,000, to make the film, and that lower budget was one of the reasons Hitchcock filmed it in black and white.
Yeah.
And he also used the crew from his TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, because they were cheaper as well. And he also cut a deal with Paramount where he wouldn't get paid his usual $250,000 salary, but would keep 60% of the movie's profits himself. Paramount doubted Psycho would be much of a hit, so they agreed, and it ended up being Hitchcock's most successful film. Took $40 million and made Hitchcock $15 million in 1960 as well.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
I mean, massive hit. And it's obviously a classic today, but what's interesting to me is like some people back then really didn't like it, and one of them, of all people, is Walt Disney. Because a couple of years after it came out, Hitchcock wanted to make a film about a murder in Disney World. But Walt turned him down flat because he was that disgusted by Psycho.
Really? Too busy washing his hands, probably.
And there's this other great story as well. Like, Hitchcock got sent a letter by an angry father who'd seen Psycho with his daughter. And his daughter had already been refusing to use baths because she'd seen the French film Les Diaboliques.
Yeah.
And now after seeing Psycho, just refused to have showers. So Hitchcock's reply, very terse.
Send her to the dry cleaners.
It's brilliant, isn't he?
She must have stunk.
Doesn't give a shit. Just from herself.
And amazingly, right, back in the 60s, cinemas would play films on rotation, so you just literally walk in and walk out whenever you want. Now, that completely blows my mind, and I still can't get around that. It's like, do you want to go on a date? Yeah, what time do you want to go? Just whenever, just walk in. Imagine walking in the middle of this. As one film ends and another, what about that 40 grand? Where's that going? So Hitchcock actually had like a cardboard cutout made where he's pointing at his watch and said that put his watch with a note saying that late entrances will be stopped by force.
This, of course, is to help you enjoy Psycho more. We really have only your enjoyment in mind.
So you weren't allowed to go in. So he kind of revolutionised cinema and just made it that thing where you have to go in when it starts and you have to leave when it ends. And he's responsible for that, and this film is responsible for that. But imagine just walking in.
Oh, I'd be furious.
Ridiculous. Ridiculous. I mean, the cinema pisses me off enough as it is. Imagine people just walking in and out.
Yeah, Hitchcock said that it was because of Janet Leigh being the star. He didn't want people wandering in midway through and waiting for her to appear when she's already gone.
It's their own fault.
Yeah. Could be.
It is. So a benefit of becoming an All the Right Movies patron is I will answer your questions on the show, and Thomas Frost has one for us. Hitchcock had a run of Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho and The Birds all in succession. Is this the greatest 4-film run of any director? If not, what is? Thanks a lot, Thomas. Great question. Yeah. My answer is very boring, so I'll keep it simple. Yes, that is the greatest 4-film run by a director.
What a cop-out. No research.
Matt, what do you think?
That'll do.
Well, I'll put a bit more thought into it.
Go on.
Thank God.
Spielberg comes so close. Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders, E.T. But you've got 1941 stuck in the right in the middle. Stinking it out. So my answer ultimately is as boring as yours, Sean, and I do think this is the greatest forerunner of films any director's ever done.
Took you 5 minutes to say the same thing as I said.
It's been a bit more thought into
well, that's me all over, isn't it? Yeah.
Westy, have you got a different
I have
answer?
got a different answer because I went and done a bit of thinking and a bit of digging, and I've answered it like 8 times in 8 different ways. But no, for me, I mean, it is an incredible run of films, and they are absolute classics. But for me, you can't really see a progression as a filmmaker. He seems like he just knows what he's fully fleshed out at that point. So for me, it's the progression of a filmmaker that I want to talk about, and it's Chris Nolan. And I think from Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, and then Inception, them 4 films
Lovely.
pretty much revolutionised cinema. Just huge films. So I would say, for me, they are a good 4. But I can't wait to see what Chris Nolan's 4 are when he's like 58 to 61.
Yeah.
So, Alfred Hitchcock then. Brilliant stuff on Psycho.
Too easy. Makes it look too easy. The bastard.
Yeah. Originally published as a novel by Robert Bloch in 1959, Psycho was adapted for the screen by Joseph Stefano. Stefano was very inexperienced at this point, and Psycho was just his second film as screenwriter after The Black Orchid in 1959. Does that lack of experience show? How good's the writing on Psycho, Matt?
It is like Jaws. I think we said back on that episode, the Jaws screenplay isn't one anyone's going to read and think, wow, that writing.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
visual, isn't it? Yeah.
And I do think it's the same with this, to be honest. It's fine. It's certainly not bad. Stefano does a good job, but I don't think anyone other than Hitchcock would have went anywhere near it. So for me, what I get from the writing is what Hitchcock saw in it, because I'm convinced he just saw this as a huge practical joke on the audience.
I once made a movie, rather tongue-in-cheek, called Psycho. Yeah. The content as such was, I felt, rather amusing. And it was a bit joke, you know.
He did have a notoriously dark sense of humour, and I just think he sees this. It's quite hilarious that half the film you're with one character, a thief, who suddenly gets murdered halfway through, and then the next half, you're sympathising with the coward who's covered it up. And then at the end, it turns out that he's been the murderer all along, and he's doing this while dressing up as his mother, while her skeleton is in the basement. Like, you can't tell me that that isn't funny, because it is so
and you're
ridiculous.
on the side of the guy who's just having an affair with as well. He saves the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the realisation that throughout the film, Norman has just been talking to himself in his mother's voice.
Mother, please.
No, I refuse to speak of disgusting things because they disgust me.
Again, ludicrous but hilarious. And that scene where Arbogast is questioning Norman, and Norman just completely falls apart under scrutiny.
He does.
Which morning was that? The next morning.
And he knows he's been caught in a line. He's looking at Marion's name in the ledger, and the way he's chewing that candy so intensely, and he's just staring at the ledger. I think that's played for laughs. I think that's really, really
shot
funny.
when he looks over at the ledger and he's just like that, and it's just like kind of up his nose, but the camera goes with him, and then comes back. It's like he's just having a laugh, and he really.
Yeah. He is. Well, because the thing is, like, through filming as well, Hitchcock would routinely hide dummies of the corpse in Janet Leigh's trailer because it made him laugh. That's what he thought of the material. And if you need any more proof, just watch the 6-minute trailer of this, where all Hitchcock does is wander around the set and tell you the plot of the film.
Good afternoon. Here we have a quiet little motel.
Yeah.
He's having an absolute laugh here. So what Stefano brings, it's fine. It's boiled down to the basic, which is what it needs. It isn't Vertigo, which has layers and layers of subtext. It's just the most frightening elements that Hitchcock wants. But the thing that stands out for me is the unexpected humour Hitchcock finds in it.
Yeah, I do think a bit more highly of the writing than you do, Matt. There's a few interesting things, I think, about the screenplay. I mean, the villain is one of the most complex and ruthlessly written villains I think we've ever seen. And I think there is some great dialogue in there as well. But the boldest thing about the writing for me has to be making a film that's totally centered around one character who appears in every scene, makes every decision, the story's told entirely from her point of view, and then killing her 40 minutes in. All the stuff in the first hour with Marion, stealing the money, going on the run, it's really engaging, and I'm totally in. Then Norman appears, and it becomes a different story. The characters all change, and the genre shifts. It goes from like a character drama to a horror thriller, and that switch is somehow seamless. Really hard to do that well. And if this was a lesser film, I think we'd be pissed off because Marion gets killed off and she's the protagonist. We've got to know her. But I think the reason Hitchcock does pull it off is because the level of filmmaking is just so high. We feel like we're in good hands and are prepared to go with it, I think. And we've seen the false protagonist trope many times since. Scream kills Drew Barrymore in the first 10 minutes. No Country for Old Men kills the main character off screen. And Game of Thrones built a reputation on killing off main characters for 8 seasons. But Psycho is the original, and for me, still the best example of it. And I think that alone makes it really good writing.
I think it's when that 40 grand disappears, when that just, it's not about the money anymore.
Yeah.
You kind of go, right, okay, really important. And he comes back and picks it up, throws it in the boot, and you see it just go in the swamp, and you kind of go, well, what's important now?
So how good's the writing for you then, Westy?
I really like the writing, like you guys have said. I just think it feels like it's one film and it switches. It's what Hitchcock brings to it visually that really, it just supports what's written, and he supports it really, really well by, there's a distinct lack of dialogue in some sequences when she's dealing with trying to get the car switched over. I remember the first time I saw this, like I was supposed to be 12 or 13 or something, and you see the policeman when she's trying to buy the car, And he's standing there and he's got the dark glasses on. I'm like, he's the psycho. He's the psycho. He's going to start killing everybody. And yeah, that's what I remember saying. He's the psycho because it's called Psycho. But one thing I don't know if I can really... I still don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I think I feel all right about it. I know Hitchcock hated it, but I know the producers needed to put it in. But there's that massive exposition scene at the end where he kind of explains the whole film.
Yeah. I got it from his mother.
And apparently Hitchcock wasn't happy with that performance, wasn't happy with the delivery, and just thought it was very much on the nose. But I like it. And he's like lighting a cigarette, and, and he's walking around, and he's got this really bolshy kind of demeanour. And I quite like that because it gives you that breath of fresh air at the end of the film. It's good that they put that in there and don't try to make it too obscure for the audience. I know it's 1960 and people are walking in and out of cinema anyway. They don't quite know what's going on. And you do need this kind of exposition, but it doesn't feel patronising is what I'm trying to say. It's really well written and really well acted, and I think it's necessary to put in the end of it.
Yeah, Dr. Richmond is called, played by Simon Oakland. I think the performance is really good. I think it does spoon feed the audience a bit.
It has
at
to,
the end,
though.
but I don't really mind
I think
either.
it's just a product of the time.
No,
at that time, people weren't aware of like split personalities or schizophrenia or whatever else. It was all brand new to them.
Also, as we mentioned, Psycho was based on a novel by Robert Bloch, published in 1959. Bloch took inspiration from the real-life serial killer, Ed Gein. And Stefano and Hitchcock did change some things. In the book, Marion is called Mary, and she only features in the first 2 chapters. Stefano fleshed her role out massively, so she is a more significant character in the film, which I think is for the best.
Right. Oh, definitely, yeah.
In the novel, Norman is quite different. He's addicted to porn, and rather than being young and handsome like Anthony Perkins, he's short, fat, and middle-aged. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Good evening.
Is he addicted to porn?
No wonder he changed it.
Hideous. That would be disgusting. Master Bates Motel.
And also, Marion's death is even more horrific in the book because Norman cuts her head off, which is too much, surely.
Yeah, I mean, Hitchcock loved the novel straight away. And he bought the rights anonymously as soon as it was published because he was that much of a fan. And it was actually quite cheap. Back then, it was for $9,000. But what he also did, he got the production team to buy as many copies as possible because he wanted to keep the story secret. And then he got so obsessed with this idea of keeping it a secret, he made the cast and crew raise their hands on the first day of filming and promised they wouldn't give anything away. And he only gave the final part of the script to those who absolutely needed it, so most people just didn't have a clue what was going on, and had a chair put on set saying Mrs. Bates, so anyone who just happened to be walking by or wander on set would see him, it's an actual report. There must be an actress around somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, now we're saying Norman Bates, he's the guy with mother issues, but back then it would have been a big twist. People wouldn't have known.
Yeah, huge.
The writing on Psycho then, a lot to work with from the source material, but Joseph Stefano did a good job in adapting it for the screen.
I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All for the best, yep.
There was a cast of stars worked on Psycho, some big names, and we're going in detail on 2 of them. Janet Leigh as Marion Crane and Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates.
Yep.
So, Matt, who are you going to talk about?
I'm going to talk about Janet Leigh because I think Perkins dominates the film so much in retrospect. I think we kind of forget how good Janet Leigh is. And it goes back to what I said about the character. So many of her character traits set her up as an antagonist, yet she's anything but. I mean, from the start, the way she has to put up that slimy businessman, you're straight on the side because of that guy.
Like,
he's horrible. And
stinks. I bet he smells like pork scratchings. He's fucking horrible. Sweaty mess. Las Vegas.
He probably does. He probably does. And things like she has to do so much great acting with her eyes as well, because it's quite a 1960s thing when she's imagining the conversations going on in her absence, which is overlaid her driving away. So she's looking worried, thinking about a colleague, talking to her boss. But then I absolutely love that grin she gets in the face when she thinks about how angry that businessman is. And because he was such a sleaze, that's great. And it's the same when she's in a motel room putting the plan together in her mind, because you can see the doubt starting to enter, and she's thinking, can I pull this situation back? And it's all through her eyes, it's all through her body language. It's really, really great. But a key scene, I think, is when she's eating with Norman in the parlour. You know, like the saying says, coming to the parlour, said the spider to the fly. Eats like a bird. It's such a great two-hander between the two of them, because she's not just polite. I think she genuinely is interested in Norman as a person. Like, who is this weird young guy having these big screaming matches with his mother? And That whole scene is about 8 minutes long, and it's just the two of them.
Yeah.
But there's so much creeping unease to it.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
And her performance, I think, is just as important as Perkins at bringing that out. And I don't think Marion is ever as sympathetic as she is right in that moment, which is brilliantly written because we know what's coming next for her.
It's brilliant, the actor as well, because she repents. She wants to go back to Phoenix and give the money back. So, it's all 700, okay.
Yeah, totally.
And that is not the most pointless sum anyone's ever written. 40 grand minus 700. I think that's fairly straightforward.
Not the sharpest tool in the box, is she?
They flushed it down the toilet, leaves half of it. Ridiculous.
Yeah, she's iconic as Marion. Classic Hitchcock blonde. But Janet Leigh wasn't the only actress who played Marion, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, the body double.
Yes, well, before that, when they shot the trailer for Psycho, Janet Leigh was unavailable. So Vera Miles, who played Marion's sister Lila, Hitchcock brought her back in, and she played the part of Marion in the shower for the trailer.
Oh, really? Okay.
Ah, right. Okay.
And when they shot the shower scene, Janet Leigh, like you say, had a body double, a model called Marley Renfro. She was a Playboy cover girl, and any shots where you can't see Janet Leigh's face, it's usually Marley Renfro we're watching in the shower scene.
Right, okay.
Right, okay.
And Westy, that leaves Norman for you.
It does, doesn't
Two
it?
peas in a pod.
Oh, what a sweetheart. I love him. I love him. Oh, he's great, isn't he? 12 cabins, 12 bacon, 2 candy. He's just brilliant. It's just incredible. It's an incredible performance. Because he's so watchable and he is likeable, but he's just creepy.
He is.
And you get them people where you just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I couldn't hold a conversation with him, but I kind of feel sorry for him from afar. I'd like wave at him, all right, like he's your neighbour or something. But I think Perkins brings that beautifully. He just brings it beautifully because, to have him, like you said, John, is like someone who's like weird and overweight and middle-aged and just a bit creepy. He's just the perfect boy next door, isn't he? He just comes down with me trusty umbrella and he's just, I'll make you a sandwich and milk and everything's just so innocent and just so nice. And the thing I love about this character is nearly everyone is reflected in a mirror apart from Norman, which normally shows a different side, like a schizophrenia, like a split personality. Yeah, Perkins has just taken this and ran with it, and he's just absolutely nailed it every single step of the way. I just think it's just wonderfully done when he looks into that bathroom and just sees what the carnage. There's not enough blood there for a murder, but he's like, and he sells that and he gets it, and you just think, he's really cleaning up. He needs to just look after, the responsibility that he's got. And I think it's brilliant from Hitchcock, and especially brilliant from Perkins. I think he absolutely nails it.
Yeah, he is complex. He's believable, and Anthony Perkins is superb. I think Norman Bates is one of the best villains in movies. Something that's unusual for Hitchcock, though, is that he allowed both Perkins and Janet Leigh to improvise and ad-lib in places.
All right.
Like the candy corn that Norman munches on a couple of times.
Yeah.
That was Perkins' idea, and Hitchcock just kept it in.
Candy?
And also when Norman and Marion talk on the porch, part of that were improvised between the two of them as well.
Great.
There are some of the big names in the cast. Martin Balsam as P.I. Arbogast is very good.
Yes.
And Vera Miles as Lila was maybe the biggest star in the film. And have you noticed as well the appearance from Hitchcock's daughter, Patricia?
No.
Yes. Marion's friend working in the bank as well.
Yeah, she's in the office. She's called Caroline.
Oh,
yeah, that's
she's
Patricia's
great.
daughter.
He was flirting with you. I guess he must have noticed my wedding ring.
I fucking love that line.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm beautiful, but like you obviously can't. No, you're rubbish.
Yeah, all great. But in those two leads we talked about, two iconic performances.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely.
Just about every scene in Psycho has gone down in movie history, but we're going to pick out three to talk about as we discuss our highlights from the film. So, Westy, you want to start us off with your highlight?
My highlight's the shower scene, obviously. It's massive. It's huge.
Huge.
You know what's coming. You can see it a mile away. And from when you look through that peephole, you're just thinking, right, well, he's gone. And you still believe it's his mum. Even though I know now, I still like to think it's her. And I didn't want to be spun out. I'd like it to be her. I'd like her to be a right little bitch just coming down, just like, fucking, it's my son. Do you know what I mean? But who turns the shower on when they're in the shower? That itself is mentality. It happens in this and it happens in Groundhog Day. and he regrets it in Groundhog Day. But who does that? You turn it on, you get the temperature, and then you get in the shower, right? So she turns it on, she's like,
"It's too cold." Yeah,
she's like, "This is perfect," and I'm kind of brought out the film a little bit. Oh, this is a bit weird, and then just seeing that silhouette from the shower curtain, and just seeing it, you just think, "Who's that? This doesn't make any sense." And then that shower curtain comes back, music kicks in, and there's just so many shots in this. I've read it so many different times, but they're saying there's 72 different angles, 52 cuts. How do you shoot a shower in 72 angles? Like, just one, and then another one there maybe, and then one there, maybe 3 or 4, and you've got what you need. But Hitchcock's like that, bang, bang, constant, and you're just so like disorientated by what's going on. You're so spun out by it, and the fact that this scene had no score whatsoever. When Hitchcock had it in his head, he was like, it's just going to be this kind of rough, just you hear that knife, but you don't see anything penetrate any flesh or anything like that. It's just all in your imagination. But that score, that bam, 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 it's just a great sequence, and that transition from the plug hole to the eye is as good as 2001 for me. I just think that's just incredible. And then it spins round and she's just on the floor and she doesn't move. But yeah, that sequence is just an absolute delight.
Yeah, I mean, the filmmaking is incredible. Like you say, 78 setups and 52 cuts. And we've got jump cuts, close-ups, extreme close-ups, static shots, iconic shots, recurring visual motifs. It's just insane, all in 45 seconds. Hitchcock must have had a vision for it really early, because he said that the shower scene was the reason he wanted to make the film in the first place.
What attracted you to this one, then?
I think the murder in the bathtub, coming out of the blue, that was about all.
So influential. I've seen this scene and Psycho in general referenced so many times in popular culture that I've lost count.
Yeah.
That'll make a chewy little montage, won't it? I'll put that together.
Do that now.
I mean, the shower scene just tells you how innovative this film is. But there's loads of innovations throughout Psycho. That scene when Norman's watching Marion through the peephole. That camera had a circular mask on the lens, and that made it look like his POV, which is very new at the time.
Right, yeah. And when Norman looks through the peephole, he takes a painting off the wall. That painting is called Susanna and the Elders, and it depicts 2 old men spying on a young woman bathing in her garden. Yeah,
right. I've got that over the fireplace.
Yeah.
There's a people on the other side.
Just a tree. People walking past me house.
Yeah. Other things, though, that shot of the camera looking up the shower head. I can't believe this on Reddit, because there's no way you can tell, but that shower head, it's actually 6 feet in diameter. And it's that big, so the water would spray around the camera and not splash the lens. Can't tell for a second. And then for the sound of the stabbing, that was a steak and a cassava melon. And then for the blood, that's Hershey's chocolate syrup. And then when Marion flushes the paper down the toilet, bizarrely, that was the first time a flushing toilet had ever been seen.
Yeah, Joseph Stefano was adamant that it had to be in there. He was adamant. I want the first flushing toilet.
Yeah.
Rebel. Fair enough, mate.
All right, mate.
Put that in your gravestone.
And also, Saul Bass, the famous graphic designer, he created the titles for the start of the film, which are great. And he also storyboarded the shower scene as well. Right. And he later actually claimed that he directed the shower scene too. But that's been refuted by everyone who was there.
I was on the set every second of every foot of film that was shot on Psycho, and Mr. Bass never directed a scene in that motion picture.
Yeah. What a claim that is to make. Outrageous.
Everyone apart from Saul. I know,
That's what you do, isn't it? I did that. No, you didn't. You know the start of Raiders when he's running away from the big thing? I did that. No, you didn't, Wesley.
Yeah, so Marion is the first kill in the film, of course, and as my highlight, I'm going to talk about the second one, the death of Private Dick Milton Arbogast. Where it is horrific when Marion is killed, I must say that
it's hilarious.
He's a bit smug. Arbogast, isn't he?
Arbogast.
Look at the picture, please. Someone always sees a girl with $40,000.
Yeah, he's a bit.
But I mean, you've got that overhead shot where Norman appears from the bedroom. What
Brilliant.
a shot
That is
that
brilliant.
is. There's a similar one later on where Norman
Yes.
carries Mother down to the basement
It
and the
moves
camera
up.
creeps
Yeah,
up the
yeah.
stairs. Yeah, it sort of swoops and
Yeah.
swirls to the same position. And then there's a famous close-up on Arbogast as he falls down the stairs, which, again, is iconic. That was a rear projection shot. Martin Balsam was just sitting on a chair with his arms flailing about and the screen behind him. And it was actually Hitchcock's idea because he used rear projection before on Saboteur.
I mean, you can kind of tell it's pretty funny now.
Yeah,
you
it's,
can.
It's hilarious, to be fair. It's really Norman wisdom.
It's
It is, but I think after Arbogast falls down the stairs, he's lying on him, and Norman's on him in a flash.
That is
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I mean, if you're making a horror and you put together a kill scene as good as this, and it's not even the best one in the film, you know you've got a good horror on your hands. I
With
think.
that slice down his face, like he's went straight for his face.
Yeah,
dude.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned Saul Bass there, and the scene he definitely did direct was this scene with Arbogast, and Hitchcock was off for a few days with illness, so the shot it without him. And Hitchcock came back. No, he said he had to reshoot it because they made it look like Arbogast was the murderer rather than the victim. Now Hitchcock watched that back. How do you do that?
Dressed as Mother, probably.
Exactly. Did he stomp up like furious? Yes. Get loaded.
I think what they've done is he done close-ups of his feet,
Right.
which made Hitchcock say that looks like he's the
Right.
murderer. So I need to do it again.
Okay, fair enough.
Right.
Yeah, terrible
Okay,
choice.
yeah.
Well, he definitely didn't do the shower scene, did he? Couldn't even get walking up the stairs, right? Fuck's sake.
Exactly.
Never mind 72 cuts in fucking 45 seconds.
And Matt, what's your highlight from Psycho?
Well, I'm going to go for the end when they discover Mrs. Bates. Because this is what I mean by manipulation and what I mean by the dark humour. Because this is Marion's sister and a boyfriend. We should want them to find out the truth. But Hitchcock's put us so much in Norman's shoes by now that when he's struggling with Sam, we want him to win and to get away. We don't want Lila to get in the house. And I love that touch when Sam is talking to Norman about the $40,000. Sam's also reflected in the mirror, so it looks like Norman's being ganged up on, which really like subliminally puts us on his side. And I think when Lila goes in the house, I always get this real like Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe to it.
With
like,
the banister, it's exactly
it is the same shot. And the tension off the scale by this point, because what you're going to find is Mrs. Bates going to get her, what is actually up with Mrs. Bates, and the detail of that impression in the bed where Norman lies with a corpse every night, which only makes sense when you've seen it more than once. But Jesus Christ, that's good. And this for me is where the dark humour lies, because that slow turning chair to reveal the skeleton with a wig. That's scary enough. And then Norman appears with the music, dressed up as a woman, that grin on his face.
Loving it.
Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Edited brilliantly. Yeah. And I love that shot, the skeleton where the light bulb is swinging, so the shadows are going back and forth in the eye sockets. But it's so ridiculous and unexpected to describe the scene out loud as the climax to a horror film. And that's why I thought Hitchcock found it funny. Just thinking of everyone in the cinema like shrieking and screaming and out of the seats in terror. And I think he probably just had a big old smile on his face and just chuckled away to himself. I mean, what an ending.
I think Vera Miles, who plays Lila, I think she's really good in the film. Serious acting chops on her, especially compared to John Gavin, who plays Sam.
Oh,
wouldn't have bored him.
He is the banister in that.
He's terrible.
I think what's interesting as well about the end is what Norman shouts when he bursts into the cellar. Have you heard that?
It's not shout Mother.
He shouts, "I am Norma Bates." It's really hard to make out, but if you listen
really?
without the music, it's really obvious.
Really?
I didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
What we should mention too is the Bates house, which I think is like a character on its own. That place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it's
it was modelled on a painting by Edward Hopper called House by the Railroad. And Hopper had been inspired by a real building in Haverstraw, New York, which is actually still there. So get yourself over there, Matt, if you're interested.
I'll get over. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to build it over here, on top of a hill, so nobody comes near us.
Yeah, I know it was built as a set completely on the Universal Studios backlot. And for years after filming, it was one of the biggest draws on the tour there.
Oh, yeah.
Which, to be fair, would be, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
That's what you'd want to see.
Yeah.
Want to see the Bates house.
I mean, we could go on for another 3 hours discussing highlights from Psycho, I think, but those three we mentioned, they are all pretty special.
Special film.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
Matt, I'm coming to you first, please. Your summary and score for Psycho.
No pressure.
No pressure. Very simple. Iconic film, iconic music, iconic performance from Perkins.
Candy?
Really underrated performance by Janet Leigh. And with the shower scene, you've got to see that in just 45 seconds. Transforms cinema forever. And the film, I think, is an absolute masterclass in manipulating an audience and putting them through the ringer. People can ask, why is Hitchcock so revered? Why did people say he's a genius? This is why he's a genius, because nothing was the same after Psycho. It's a nerve-shredding 10.
Oof. Yeah, it's a film I'm in awe of, to be honest. The level of filmmaking is exceptionally high. The shower scene in particular will be analysed by a film student as long as movies are made, I think.
Yeah.
The cast are excellent. The two leads give iconic performances. The writing is groundbreaking in the way it twists and turns the structure. And it was a cultural phenomenon when it was released, a real landmark in cinema. Subjectively, it's not one of my favourite films, or one that I watch a lot, but because of those things I mentioned, it does have to score very highly. So I'm also going to go 10 out of 10.
Nice.
Lovely.
And Westy, your summary and score for Psycho, please.
Yeah, not only did it change the landscape of cinema or the landscape of horror cinema itself, of how you watch it, that's what it also did. It's not, how it's made, it's also how it's viewed. And I think that's equally as important. Yeah. And without this, 17 years later, Star Wars comes along, and then Spielberg's heavily influenced by this, loves Hitchcock. There's a few things, watching it back now, where you kind of go, it hasn't really aged very well. It is a product of its time. It is a film made in 1960, and we do have to remember that when we are watching it. But still, there's films I've seen today that still aren't as technically accomplished as this is. And the only bits that let this down are the bits that are reflective of the time. And I think the reveal at the end, when he comes in looking really happy, is quite funny now. You could have done that in a bit more of a disturbing way. So it kind of just lays all of these ground marks, and people kind of followed it, and it's a landmark of cinema, and it's one of the biggest ones, and it's impossible to ignore, and it's impossible to give anything less than a 10 for what it is and what it achieved and how easily Hitchcock made this look. It's just bafflingly good. 10.
Okay, then that leaves Psycho with a huge 30 out of 30.
Wasn't going to be anything else, was it? Let's be honest.
And that's all we have this time round. If you like what we do on The Cutting Room, you can access bonus episodes of the show by supporting us on Patreon. You can also get access to over 200 hours worth of All the Right Movies podcasts and lots more. Your help and support is massively appreciated. And the more support we get, the more videos we can and will make. We're going to say goodbye for now, and thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
You hear that?
You okay, Westy?
Fuck off!